Good morning. How are y'all today? I'm doing good. So anyway, I looked up a Bible verse that I have read many times. And I know the Lord says, Lord God, Heavenly Father, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. So he's got plans for us. That's Jeremiah 29:11, and that's in the Old Testament, King James Version. But God has a plan for each and every one of us when we put our life in his hands. And if you don't put your life in his hands, we want his plans to go forward. That's for us. So I'm doing what he wants me to do, I feel like, by sharing my life with you all. And I'm going to tell you today the second chapter of what happened when I went to Great Lakes. And I ended up on my last video that there I was in Chicago catching a bus the next morning for Great Lakes. I got my suitcase and I caught the bus for Great Lakes, which is up north. So I went on up there and I got off at where the naval station was. And I asked somebody, how do I get to headquarters for this base? And they told me how to do it. Here I am. I think I was 18 at that time. Very young. But I was true to my husband. And I wanted to tell him, you know, I still love you, honey. I'm not running around on you. And I'm coming up here to visit you and see what happens. So I went to headquarters. And they let me speak to the head honcho. And so I just went in and told him my story. That Buddy kept going AWOL. He thinks I'm running around on him, and I'm not. So I've come up here to try to find me a job and a place to stay and be around while he serves this 6 month in the brig, which is prison, 6 months. And he's got to serve it because that's what they decided to do to punish him instead of kicking him out of the service. I mean, he should have got kicked out, but he did not. So he said, well, tell you what, we have an opening in our laundry for a helper. Would you want that job? I said, I sure would. I will take it, sight unseen. He said, okay, it's yours. So he hired me then and there because he was the boss. And I don't know to this day who he really was, the top colonel or whatever in charge of the base. And he said, and I'll give you some more advice. He said, there is a lot of people in the little adjoining towns here that rent rooms. If you look in the paper, you can find a room to rent, very reasonable, and that way you'll stay near. And the train runs back and forth between these little towns near here. And I got me a newspaper and I looked at it, and sure enough, rooms for rent. So I got on that train, and well, I was going to report to work the next day. Just come back to the base and go to the laundry and check in. And you know what kind of job I got, honey? I was folding all the high-ups, biggity wigs on the base, their shirts, their drawers, their underclothes, and anything that went through the laundry. And I learned how to fold t-shirts properly, their undershorts properly, and they put them in bundles and sent them back to whoever they belonged to because they didn't have to do their laundry. They were bigwigs. That's what I called them, bigwigs. So that's the job I got. And it wasn't a hard job. It was a good job, and I enjoyed it. And the thing of it is, when I was working in this laundry, there was a big door because the trucks backed up to this door to get the bundles of laundry, and I could look over, and the brig, the jail, was over from the laundry. And they would take the prisoners out to clean up the yard of the jailhouse, and I could see my husband over there picking up trash, cleaning the yard with the guards. I mean, somebody with a gun watching him. And I could see him. We couldn't talk or commute or talk to anybody. You know, I could just see him. But anyhow, I found me a room in a little town nearby, which within the train distance. It only took about 5 minutes to get to this little suburb nearby. and I can't remember the name of that little town right now, but the lady had this big house, and it had upstairs and downstairs, and she had one bedroom still for rent. Now you share the bath. There was a bath upstairs and a bath downstairs. So it was, and there was 3 bedrooms upstairs. The other 2 rooms were rented, and I rented the last room $10 a week, which I had saved my money and I could pay that. So I paid her enough to stay a month, $40. And the little half bed in there was so small, but it was big enough for one person. It didn't have a refrigerator, didn't have a stove. So while I stayed up there and at the base, near the base, I just lived on canned tuna, canned chicken, a loaf of bread, mayonnaise. I like mayonnaise better than mustard, and warm milk. I'm gonna have milk. I just buy it a quart at a time and drink it up. And if it's spoiled a little, I drink it anyway. I have to have my milk, and that's the law with this person. I think that's one of the reasons I'm 91 years old and still healthy. And when I fell not too long, well, it's been a year now since I fell and thought I killed myself. I tripped over one of the cats, and I hit on my side. And I've told about it before, how I fell over, and I thought I had killed myself because, man, I hit hard, and I couldn't move. I just laid there, and James was outside, and I was hollering, help, help, and he couldn't hear me. So I'll just insert this as I go along. And you know how I am. So anyhow, I'll just insert this. So there I lay, and I could not get up. So finally, I said, well, I don't believe I've got anything broken after all. I thought sure I'd rusted my hip, and a lot of older people, when they get as old as I was, 90 years old, and I was 90 then, and it wasn't broken. Nothing was hurting except where I hit my hip and my shoulder. So I rolled over, and I was going to crawl over to a chair or something to get up, because when you're that old, you cannot get up without holding on to something. Later on, I Googled what you do to get up, and now I know you really need a chair. But I didn't have one in the kitchen because the dining room's in the other room. And I was looking, and I thought, well, the stove. So I pulled the stove oven door down, and I was getting ready to use it. And here comes James in, and he says, what are you doing? I said, well, I just fell, and I thought I killed myself, but I didn't. I'm still alive. So I'm trying to get up. He said, well, quit that. You're going to break that door off. I was not real lightweight. So he says, here, let me get you up. So he grabbed my hands and tried to, you cannot lift an old person up by their hands. And you can Google that. So I said, honey, the only way you can get me up is get me under my arms and lift me up to my feet. And he's a big, tall man and strong as an ox. And he just reached under my arms and lifted me up and put me on my feet. And all of a sudden, I was fine. I was a little sore on my hip later and my shoulder, but everything was fine. There was a little bruise on my hip, but not on my shoulder. So I was healed. I was well. He put me on my feet, and we went ahead and went walking that morning. Okay, I'm back in Great Lakes now, working in the laundry, making my money, and I would have my breakfast every morning at the base. They had a cafeteria. You had to pay for it. So I would have a half of a cantaloupe for breakfast. They had them for like $1 a piece, about this big. So, and it was delicious. And you can get by on that half a cantaloupe. They had boiled eggs, and I didn't care for boiled eggs, but I'd eat that cantaloupe and go on to work. And I'd bring me a bologna sandwich, because you can buy bologna and bread. Bologna and light bread. You know what light bread is. Light bread is white bread. I never knew about wheat bread and all that kind of bread. Back in that was like 1951, 52. I don't know if they even had wheat bread. All we ever had was light bread, which was white bread. We called it light bread. So I'd make me a bologna sandwich and with mayonnaise on it, and that's what I ate for lunch. I didn't go to the cafeteria for lunch. Couldn't really afford it. But I did find out later that I had some, well, see, I was by then, Buddy had been in a while, and I was getting my allotment, which wasn't much, but I would hang on to whatever I could. And so I was making it, and then they decided that they would let these prisoners, if their wife was around, that he could spend the weekend with them. And Buddy got to come home. He would ride that train, and I gave him money, and he would come, and we had a wonderful reunion back together. And I told him, you know, honey, I don't run around on you. I didn't do that. I went square dancing. Didn't amount to a hill of beans. But I didn't appreciate my brother-in-law telling that stuff on me. But you know, it was all for the best. Because when I went to Great Lakes and stayed, and we was together and sleeping on a little old half bed, honey, you're gonna be close. We was close. This lady had a porch down on her house, and she had like a swing with cushions on it that was real wide, 3 or 4 people. And I would sneak down there and sleep because it was a lot cooler down there. We didn't have air conditioning. I didn't have a fan. And so it was summertime, and I'd go down there and sleep on the porch. And she caught me one time. She said, do not be sleeping on my porch. She was Italian. She kept her olive oil by the gallon and cooked with olive oil. She wouldn't let us cook down there. We just had to make do in our room, and those other couples did. But I will tell you, I'm a crybaby, and I would just cry, and I know they could hear me in the other rooms sometimes because I just sobbed loud. And so anyway, they said, and where is your husband? One of them asked me, and I said, well, he's in a special school. I just didn't have the heart to tell them he was in the brig. I think they knew he was in the brig, but their husbands were ball players, and the Navy paid them extra. But these women had come to stay with their husbands, and they couldn't find no place to be, so them girls spent their days in that one little room. But I had a job, so I went out and worked, and it was a lot better. But I don't know what they did during all the day. Guess they read, because, honey, we didn't have no televisions or anything like that. You had radios. But they invited me to them ball games, and I went to some of them. And those guys could throw balls 90 miles an hour or something. They would test them how fast they could throw the ball, because their husbands were the pitchers. And they could pitch a ball like, I never saw nothing like it. If it would have hit you, it would have killed you, or it would have killed me. But they caught it. The other guys would catch it, and it didn't kill nobody. But if it hit you, it hurt you. They'd throw it at such high speeds. It was amazing. So I went to some of their ball games, and they figured out where Buddy was. But he finally got out of the brig, and they said, now we're going to transfer you back to boot camp. It's going to be the 3rd time he started boot camp. So I said, well, honey, he said, and I'll be leaving in about a week. So he said, now I want to tell you one thing for sure. Do not come to California. Go back to Indiana and stay there with your family and everybody, and I'll be fine. He said, I'm going to stick. I'm going to stay. Well, I really just didn't answer him because I knew what I was going to do. I'm going to go to California. Absolutely. I got my money saved. So I just said, oh, well, what do you know? You know, I didn't lie to him and said I ain't coming, because that would have been a lie, because I knew good and well in my heart that I was going to California and make sure he stayed in the Navy and not hitchhike home again. He was like a homing pigeon. You've heard about, or was that, what kind was it, pigeons that they could carry messages across the country? Well, that's what Buddy was. He was a homing pigeon. He wanted to come back to Indiana, and he did it 2 times. So I said, I'll go to California. So I didn't answer him. But after I gave notice at my job, and I bought me a ticket to California. There was a train back then, and I've told it before, but all of you didn't hear it, called the Super Chef. 2 nights and 3 days, and you was in California. Well, now, they had berths where you could sleep, but it was a lot cheaper if you just sat up in your seat and kind of leaned back and took your naps. Well, I bought the one where you just stay in your seat because I was young and strong and didn't think much about it. So I got that ticket and I caught the train. Beautiful big train. I mean, it just barely stopped places. And they had food on the train that you could get something to eat, a sandwich, or you could go to the dining room. But I just ate sandwiches mainly, cheap and poor. But it didn't bother me. Like I said, I was young. I love the scenery. I mean, it was gorgeous going through some
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
So I would, my Sarah is talking, and I'm not going to talk to her. I need to turn her off and shut up. These iPhones are something else, aren't they? All that artificial intelligence we're running into, it blows my mind. Of course, such changes I've seen. So I'm on the train, and I'm traveling for 2 nights and 3 days. So I had to sleep 2 nights, kind of leaning back a little. And I just slept. You will when you get tired enough, because you know I go to bed at 8 o'clock. And it's real quiet, and the train is rumbling on. And when I would wake up and look out the windows, which was beautiful scenery, and I remember when we got out through the desert, and it was so desolate. But we went through Iowa and some of those places. You know, that train's not running anymore. They retired it 2 or 3 years later and stopped it. So that train was retired. And I'm one of the ones that got to ride on one of its last times almost. So I was coming into California, and you started seeing these palm trees, and it was like a dream come true. California is so beautiful. It is so beautiful. And I thought, this is so gorgeous. I had a little black and white camera that you could take pictures, and even the skies were beautiful in California. Everything was beautiful to me. So I go on out there, and I get off the train, and here I am in San Diego, California. And I look all around. Now what do I do? What am I going to do now? How do you find a place to stay? What do you do? I don't know. I'm about 18 years old, and I said, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to catch me a bus and go out to headquarters. And that's what I did. I caught me a bus, and I went out to the training base where you can visit the headquarters. And I went out there, and I went in, and I said, I want to see who's ever in charge here. They said, yes, ma'am. They treated me like a lady because I put on my good dress and my little hat and my little shoes that had heels like this. I was showing off. I was putting on the dog. So I went in. I just sauntered all in there, and they said, well, he said he was the chief or something, chief officer of the base there. A very nice young man, about 40-something. I thought he was old. But he said, what can I do for you? So I told him, I said, well, my husband is here in boot camp for the 3rd time. And he kept hitchhiking home. And he just got out of the brig. And they have reassigned him back out here to take boot camp again. And he says he's not going to run off anymore. And they have faith in him. They're going to keep him in the Navy. And to keep him in the Navy so he don't run off anymore, I'm his wife, and I want to stay here and live in California. He said, well, I said, I've got to find a place to stay, and I got to hunt me a job. He said, well, now, you know, I can help you with finding a house to stay because we have Navy wives that stay over in this project. He says, and you know, I just saw we had an opening for a 1-bedroom. Would you be interested? Are you kidding? Would I be interested? That's the Lord going before me and making them crooked places straight again. I said, I sure would. So I got the chit. He said, now you take the bus and you go here, there, and yonder. He gave me instructions where to go, and I did it to the project. It's called Project. It's housing for people that don't make a lot of money, which was the Navy people as well as others. So I went to the office of that place, and they showed me where the apartment was and showed it to me. It had a bed with a mattress on it, a refrigerator, stove, and, the necessities. But no blankets, no dishes, no pots and pans, and stuff like that, towels, But I said, wonderful. So I was in walking distance of a store where I could buy everything I needed, like a Jot 'em Down store. Back then, they had them in different places. They were like a Woolworth. That might have been a Woolworth. I can't remember, but they had everything you needed. So it was within walking distance. So I went and got me a couple of blankets. I got me a pillow. I got a couple of pots, some dishes, plates, forks and spoons, everything I would need to cook. And I got me some groceries. There was a grocery store. Just bare necessities. Potatoes, a skillet, some oil, the things you got to have like when you go camping. And that's what I did. And so I got settled in my little apartment. And don't you know, that afternoon after I got all settled, because this was a day's job, there was a bus. It was Saturday by then. And there was a bus coming down the road, and it stopped. And I was walking, carrying all that stuff. And they said, would you want to go to church tomorrow? We send a bus around here. And if you want to go to church, we'll pick you up. I said, I sure would. And you know what? It was an Assembly of God church. And that's what I am, Assembly of God, Pentecostal, believing God can do anything. Because I was always taught, my mom always told me, God can do anything. You could just trust him. So I said, I sure would like to go to church. And they picked me up the next morning, and I went to church, and I had a church family. The Lord helped me. And they were wonderful people. And then I needed some more covers. I didn't have a real heavy cover. And don't you know, we had a relative that her husband, on Buddy's side, he was in the Navy too. And she was out there, and I didn't know that, but she heard through her letters that Buddy was in California and that his wife was out there in this project. She knew exactly where it was. She come to see me. And I like to fell over. Her name was Tootsie. And that wasn't her real name, but that Toots is what we called her. And she come and she says, well, I'm glad to meet you. We had never met. And so she said, well, I know how it is in this project, and I bought you a blanket. I said, you did? And she had this heavy wool blanket. Will keep you warm in 0 weather. I kept that blanket for years, but I was allergic to it, but you don't put it next to your skin. You put the other blankets first, and then the wool blanket on top. So that worked really good. And I didn't see her anymore because she lived over far from me. But she made a special trip to come bring me that wool blanket. And I kept it for years. I bought it home from California when we came home a few years later when the twins were around 2 years old. We moved back to Indiana. My daddy was real sick. And that's another story. So here I am in San Diego, and he's going through boot camp. And I will say, when he graduated, I went to see the graduation, and he made it. You know, when they trained those sailors, they really, back then, they treated them really rough. And it was tough for him, and he did not like it. But he stuck in there, and he ended up serving 4 years active, 4 years inactive. So he had 8 years service. And James said, you reckon we could get that Home Depot discount? Because James had some medical problems and never got to serve in the service at all. And he envies all those that got to go, and he didn't get to go. So my nose is itching again. Y'all know how I am. I hope it ain't company. Don't want no company right now. I'm busy talking to y'all. So anyway, he served, and so James likes every discount he could get when he has to buy building materials and stuff. So now, honey, look how many years ago that's been. He just asked me that the other day. He said, I've got the list of all. I couldn't find Buddy's records and stuff. I think I have some in a lockbox somewhere. But I don't know. You know what I decided? And don't y'all tell him. He makes enough money, he don't need a 10% discount all the time. He can just pay it. It ain't gonna hurt him. And if he can't afford it, I'd help him. He's looking to buy another house right now, and he may buy it today. So, because, you know, he's 83 now, and really he should be to retirement age. But doing houses now is more like a hobby to him. And there are people that have big boats, and they join these big golf club places where, you know, you can go in and have cocktails and stuff. They have them around here. And anyway, I think this is a hobby. I said, honey, you have to have a hobby, don't you? He said, well, I need to do something. I've got these guys that need to work. And so he came in this morning. He told me, he says, so I made a little higher offer, because he had offered. And I said, that ain't going to get it. Now, I have been around James long enough to what's going to get a house and what ain't going to get a house. I said, you're going to have to go better than that. He came in, he said, well, I went better, and I offered him this much. So he may get that one today. They're supposed to let him know within 24 hours or something. He might not get that. It might be 12 hours, 24. I don't remember. Whatever he does, I just try to support him as much as I can. That's a fun thing to do. I supported number one in his music and his bakery routes and all of that. And we had a partnership with the bakery. And then we had like 3 donut trucks on the road. And then I have helped. And then when I married, he passed away at 63. And we had a lot of adventures on the evangelistic field that I have not nearly told all of them. There's so many. But I tell you what, I've had the most interesting life of anybody I have ever met. And I never dreamed as a little girl on the farm that someday I would have such a future. And here I am, 91. It's still going on. Now, James is going to a meeting with the investors that do housing and stuff today. And I tell you what, I quit going. I did go a while. They would have some interesting speakers, but they got these chairs in that you just can't sit on. And I couldn't stand it, but now they've moved it. And sometimes you can get some good food. But I cooked me some good food the other day. Those potatoes and sausage, and that was so good. And I did 2 cans, so we had quite a bit of it. And I have enough left to have for lunch today because he's having lunch out, and I'm not going. I'm staying home. They're boring. I like to be entertained. I'd rather watch Hannity, which I haven't watched yet, or something going on YouTube, or something going on Fox News. I like keeping up with world events. And, buddy, there's a lot of world events going on right now, let me tell you. And I'm sure you're all aware of it. If not, that's your business, but I enjoy it. And so I got my coffee, and I'm going to watch Hannity a while, and then I may watch Laura, and then I'll read a while, and then I got to run to the store. It's just one thing after another, and I stay busy, and I thank the Lord for my life, that I can stay busy and that I have good health. So I say, thank you, Jesus, all the time. I pray as I go, and I carry this Bible with me a lot. And this is the one I took to California. It's the one I gave to Buddy when I got married to him, and I dedicated it to my loving husband, and he never did use it. So I just took it to California, and when I'd get lonely, I'd sleep with the Word of God. You said you could stand on it, so I didn't stand on it. I slept with it. And I would flip it open and read it. And I have got things in here that I've marked when we went through some terrible times, and I was looking at some of the stuff this morning where I had marked, and it brings back memories of my life in the past, and when I was in California, and when we was traveling on the evangelistic field, and when Pat Day, the famous jockey, gave us a 45-foot fifth wheel one time. I marked that in here. I mean, how many times does that happen to people? It happened to us when we were on the evangelistic field traveling in fifth wheels. And that's another story. So I'll talk to you again. God bless you. Walk that path or Jesus would be pleased with you. Love you. Bye-bye.